Hi there. My name is Julie Ireland, and I am a GTD coach. And I wanted to share, or I guess give a bit of a tour, so to speak, of my own personal GTD system, which certainly has evolved and been refined over the past, if I can believe this, 21 years. Yeah, I went to a GTD seminar in 2003. That was kind of my first introduction to GTD. And kind of where I was back then is very different than where I am now. And kind of just on the history note, I realized when I first started, it was a big learning curve, like it is for a lot of people. I mean, I was like learning this thought process and then like over back at my desk, kind of like, huh? So, the choice that I made in the beginning, which I really think is, was the great choice for me was to use the thing I was already familiar with. So at the time I was using Lotus Notes for my email and my calendar. Now, I had like 1,100 emails, but I decided to use the to-do list in Lotus Notes because I was already familiar with the program itself, and it just made sense to just not try to throw in software learning when I was already using, Lotus Notes for my calendar email. That really evolved at some point a few years later with the evolution of e-productivity. So one of our consultants created e-productivity, which is like a plugin, like a very robust plugin for Lotus Notes. And that just took it to a whole new level because at that point, that software linked my projects to my actions and kind of did a bunch of other stuff, but it really kind of ramped it up. And I was really ready for that. And I used that for years. It just worked seamlessly, synced with, I think at the time was a BlackBerry. And, all that was just all fabulous. And then we switched to Google. So we moved out of Lotus Notes into Google. And it was like, huh? I really had this moment of like, oh my God, what am I going to do? This tool that I've used for years that I'm so familiar with that I really, really like is now not part of the equation anymore. And I had a very difficult time in trying to decide what to do, what to use. I didn't particularly care for the Google task. So that whole concept of like, well, my email and my calendar are going to be connected to my to-do list. It's like, nope, don't like that. And I kind of went through this like, spin around the block, right? I really knew OmniFocus really well. I was already using Evernote for reference. I kind of like Nirvana, all these kind of tools had different pieces, but I was like, Julie, you got to get set up like today. So I decided to basically buy myself a little bit of time and space for that decision. So I decided to use a paper system for 1 month. Like that was my experiment. Like I'm going to just move everything to paper for a 1 month. That'll give me a little breathing space to decide, what digital tool I want to use. And that was the plan. So, I did the formidable task of migrating things from e-productivity into paper, which was like a mega weekly review. I think it was like 3 days of like that, the onerous thing of moving manually everything from that list to my paper system, which, in and of itself had a big clue for me. I was like, I kind of thought maybe I was a little, overcommitted, but until I was doing that manually, and then I had the stuff in like a paper binder, I was like, there's something to this. And so 1 month turned into two because I was like, like I think I'm gonna keep using this for a little bit just to see what happens. And 2 months turned to three, and all of a sudden, like, I really started enjoying having lists in my system, in my hands. Now still using a digital calendar, obviously, in like a bunch of different digital inboxes, but this was really where the primary bulk of my lists were living. And there was something about the connection to the lists, in my own handwriting. It it helped me connect to what I was agreeing to, and also was kind of like volume control, you know, and I could not have known that. Like if you would have asked me, 10 years ago, Julie, are you going to use a paper system? I'm like, I think that's a good idea. David always talks about how great paper is. And I was like, no way. Like, that's too slow for me. I'm too fast. Like, blah, blah, blah. All these things, I wouldn't have known until I gave myself permission to try it. And here, that experiment is now 7 years in the making. And, I do consider periodically switching to a digital tool. Like there are trade-offs to using paper. My handwriting is like, ugh. And it's very manual and all those things. But at the same time, like those are really assets for me because it slows me down. It lets me, I have to manually connect to this thing. And for me, there's just tremendous, tremendous value in them. Now, I don't, it's not for everybody. So this isn't like, go buy a paper system. But for people, I think that want to try paper, it's worth trying. And I like to also include the disclaimer, which is it's not old school. I think some people, I have a client who would really like to use paper, but she has this sort of like covert assumption somehow that it's like, it's not like somehow, it's not modern enough or that, whatever that word is, like somehow like you're going to have this kind of digital deficit. So that I want to just like lay that to rest. That's unequivocally not true. So, and I've also kind of modified my own paper system over the years. I certainly modified it from the original GTD and paper organizer setup guide. So I don't have like a notes in section. So in the paper setup guide, there is a recommendation to put like a place for capture. I felt like that was too clunky for me. So I use this spiral bound notebook for all my capture, like my meeting notes, like things I'm capturing. That's separate from where my lists are living, which is this. And I bought this from the Container Store, the line many of my clients have seen this. It's called Russell and Hazel, and it's actually like a clickable binder. I actually really like that. I like the click, 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 and I like the design of this, and I like the sturdiness of this. I actually bought a new one recently, but I haven't switched it yet because this is still really in good shape after all these years. And I basically, and we can put a screenshot of this, but it's basically 5 sections. I've really stripped it down to 5 sections. So the first tab or section is agenda. So that's where I have my conversation parking lots, as I like to call them, for people that I interface with regularly. Meg Edwards, Frank Sopper, a bunch of personal people that I connect with and have things I want to discuss with. The thing that one of the things that doesn't live in here is doctor's appointments. So I use the reminders app on my phone for doctor's appointments because I know I'm going to have my phone in a doctor's appointment and I might forget to take this with me. So doctor's appointments lives on the phone. Second tab is action lists. So that's where my context lists live. I have modified them over the years, as most people have. I still have a calls list. I still have a home list. I have 3 computer lists now. I used to have 1 computer list, which was way too long and overwhelmed me. So I split it. For work, I have 2 computer lists, which I refer to as low bandwidth and high bandwidth, because I found for me, when I'm deciding, what to engage in, it's really like how much cognition, creativity, brain power is required. So my low bandwidth tasks are the things that are more transactional, or they're kind of like I can kind of knock them out easily, versus my high bandwidth stuff. They require kind of more like space, creative thinking. So I split those up. That works beautifully for me. I have a separate computer list for my personal stuff. I don't want to look at that. I don't want to look at that list when I have my metaphorical GTD Focus hat on. And then I also split out my reading list. So this was also super helpful. I had that all mixed in with computer. I pulled it out and I've evolved it to what I call read, watch, and listen. So it's sort of like my at learning lists. And I just like having that separate. I call it sort of like an activity-based context, like it's specific to learning something new. And I like having that separate. I have a few other lists in there that, I just have given myself permission to customize over the years. At the end of the day, those lists really are just whatever is going to work for the individual. The thing that does not live in the action list is my errands list. So, that is also on reminders along with the doctor's appointment agendas. I like having that on the phone. Next tab is waiting for. So that is just a tab, with my waiting for list, personal stuff, professional list. I use the kind of road tested naming convention, which is who I'm waiting for, what I'm waiting for, and the date I ask them for it. So when I'm doing my weekly review, it sort of like helps me determine the follow-up is needed. Next tab is projects. So that really is just 2 flat lists, 1 professional outcomes, 1 personal outcomes, I guess not separated, but grouped together by areas of focus. So I have my coaching projects, I have my marketing and branding projects, I have my admin projects, my health projects, finance projects, home projects. I have the outcomes grouped by area of focus, which is great. It helps me relate more to my project list, and also kind of gives me a mini area of focus review when I'm doing my weekly review. Next tab is project support. So that is just really like very basic project support. It's where I kind of scribble my mind sweep or like a little natural planning model for my projects. I also have project support, digital storage and, email folders and, documents and things like that. I also have physical file folders for many of my projects. I think most of us have project support, in multiple places. Someday Maybe lives in Evernote. So at this point, 21 and counting years into my GTD practice, I have a Someday Maybe filing cabinet. It's huge. And I surely cannot do that. I couldn't do it in paper, but I couldn't do it like in a flat list at this point. So I have it in kind of this kind of fat filing cabinet by kind of topic, so to speak, in Evernote, which I really works beautifully for me. So I can talk more about that in the future. So that really, this is like, between this and then just the reminders app and my digital calendar, like that's really, the current evolution of my trusted system, which just works beautifully for me. It's like, I like that it's kind of hybrid. I like to tell people, if you're curious about it, you can run that 1-month experiment and see what happens. Thank you again for watching, and take care.